There's an island off the coast of Albania. It's called Sazan. We have it up there. For decades, it was a military base, Soviet-era bunkers, tunnels, a garrison. Before that, ordinary Albanians fished those waters. It sits at the mouth of the Bay of Volare, one of the most beautiful stretches of coastline in Europe. It hasn't been paved over yet. Notice I say yet. Because Sazan Island is now slated to become a luxury resort development. Hospitality, an eco-resort they're calling it, which is what you call a resort when you'd like people to stop asking questions. Welcome to WWJPS. This is Vanessa Pinto, your host, and yes, today we are going to be talking about Jared Kushner. We are living in a time where the line between public servant and private developer hasn't just been blurred, it has been erased. We are going to trace the path of Jared Kushner from his family home, where Benjamin Netanyahu once slept, to the literal islands he's eyeing today. This isn't just about real estate. It's about a man who has managed to position himself at the center of the world's most sensitive political nodes without ever being elected and without ever seeming to worry about the ethical fallout. Who is Jared Kushner? And why is he the one running the clown show?
Now, why are many talking about Jared Kushner? Well, I'm sure you've seen him pop up a lot lately, and admittedly, he is an interesting guy. In Trump's first term, it was Jared Kushner who came out of nowhere and started to broker Middle East peace deals. It was Kushner who developed the Abraham Accords deal. It was Kushner who helped to set up the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem exactly 70 years on its anniversary. It was Kushner who just recently, even though he holds no official White House position, instituted a major Israel deal between nations this term. And it was Kushner who advised this administration on what could happen if Gaza was vacated and then rebuilt. And now we see he is making plans to turn Gaza into an AI-driven smart city with his Project Sunrise plan. And ironically, Kushner knew the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, since he was a child. It's just interesting how he now is in...
You see, you have to understand that for Jared Kushner, this wasn't just a political alliance. It was a family affair. Stories have surfaced for years about how close the Kushners were. And if we just go back a teeny tiny frame, you can see he's playing kickball or soccer with the child, let's see.
And ironically, Kushner knew the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, since he was a child.
Here we are. This is his relationship with that man, right? And so stories have surfaced for years about how close the Kushners were with Benjamin Netanyahu in particular.
Than that of any other Israeli prime minister. So by all indications, Bibi Netanyahu's influence over the Trump administration's appears to be much, much more robust than that of any other Israeli prime minister, maybe ever, right? Why is that? Well, consider this. There's a new book that's receiving incredible worldwide reviews everywhere except, of course, in Israel, where they're calling it all BS. It's called Kushner, Inc. Kushner, Inc., as in Jared Kushner, and Jared's father. And here's part of the takeaway on this book, right? That Netanyahu is like an uncle to Jared Kushner, has been since Jared was a little kid. Bibi Netanyahu has been visiting his house and staying with his dad and his family. When Kushner, who is now in charge, by the way, of the Middle East and Israeli policy for the Trump administration, when he was just a little tiny boy, Netanyahu would visit his dad and would actually sleep in young Jared's bed.
Did you hear that? He wasn't just a visitor, he was practically an uncle. There are reports of him staying in the family home, much like that man said, and Jared would have to sleep in the basement because Bibi would take his room. That's not a standard diplomatic meeting or relationship. That's a deep-seated personal entanglement. When Jared entered the first Trump administration, he used that personal proximity to reshape the Middle East. He called it peace, but for many, the Abraham Accords were a masterclass in transactional diplomacy, economic packages for normalization. Now, it wouldn't be me if I didn't glance at the Epstein files to reference the Kushner name. Here we are back again in the Epstein files, and when I just put in the name Kushner, all sorts of things came up, right? Now, buried in the DOJ's Epstein files, a chain of 2019 emails with the subject line, quote, Apollo Epstein Kushner connection, right? As we can see up there. These were sent by a whistleblower named Christopher Delorio, who spent years bombarding the SEC, the DOJ, the FBI, and financial journalists with allegations that a penny stock called Environmental Solutions Worldwide was a money laundering shell, and that the SEC had known for years, in his words, that Epstein was running an extortion Ponzi slush fund. Here's why they're in the files, and why the name in that subject line rhyme. Leon Black, Apollo's co-founder, really did pay Jeffrey Epstein $158 million for tax advice. That is a proven fact. When he went and sat before Congress just recently for questions, he admitted that fully and without hesitation that yes, Epstein did. He did pay Epstein that money, but he really didn't discuss anything beyond that, right? And that's not a conspiracy theory. And Leon Black and Jared Kushner really do orbit the same tiny circle of New York money. The emailer even attached a photo of them sitting together in the stands. Isn't that there? Look at that. They look like they're having fun. Now let's jump to the present. Jared has no title, no security clearance, but he's still out there.
Took office in 2017, Jared Kushner wasn't supposed to be running foreign policy. Very quickly, he was. Officially, he was just a senior advisor. With what expertise, you may ask? Nothing really other than the family connection. He became one of the most powerful unelected figures in modern White House history. What made his role unusual? Kushner had no government experience, no diplomatic background, no elected position, and yet he was given control over.
And do you notice the similarities between that and Jeffrey Epstein? And again, not saying that Jeffrey Epstein, but he's the mold. He's the mold of the people that get things done for Israel. And this is all in my opinion. This is all allegedly. This is all for entertainment purposes, and you can draw your own conclusions. But the bottom line is, this kid has had an agenda since he was a child. His marriage to Ivanka Trump, in my opinion, was not an accident. And I think that Bibi has been grooming him for quite some time.
Major global issues, including the Middle East peace process. The New York Times described his portfolio as, quote, extraordinarily broad, quote, for someone in his position. If there's one area where Kushner built his reputation, it's here, the Middle East, and specifically Israel and the Gulf states. So Jared Kushner wasn't just working on the Middle East, he was given full carte blanche on working with Israel.
For 1 second, that Bibi Netanyahu would have the relationship with Jared Kushner that he has from that starting point. Unless he had picked him, that child was the chosen one. I mean, I think it's funny that Peter Thiel talks about the Antichrist, because if there is one, it's Jared Kushner. It is definitely not Greta.
Acquaintance, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. The two decisions that changed U.S. policy, then came the moves that redefined America's position in the region. One, recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital in 2017. Two, moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem in 2018. These might sound symbolic. They weren't. Within 10 months of Trump's first term, he stopped signing the waiver. In 2017, he recognized Jerusalem as Israel.
And remember when he was first elected, because I remember when he did actually give Kushner that position. And at first, again, I was still deeply in the matrix and completely asleep. I remember thinking that it was just due to the fact that he was Ivanka's, husband, and he wanted to give him this position. I thought it was more for his daughter. Little did I know they've been working, Donald Trump like, I mean, my God. So it would make sense that to place someone like Kushner in completely their orbit when they already know that the Trump family is going to take a certain amount of power, they position themselves to enable to change the world. I remember laughing when he said that Kushner was stoked for, I was like, what is this kid? And now, my God.
Within 10 months of Trump's first term, he stopped signing the waiver. In 2017, he recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And in 2018, he moved the embassy. And Jared Kushner was right in the middle of that. The decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital didn't come out of nowhere. It had been sitting in U.S. policy for decades after Congress passed the Jerusalem Embassy Act in 19...
And it wasn't enacted until Kushner was there, right? He has been an amazing sort of little gray ghost in the background, like the guy in the Godfather movie that's the murderer that only appears walking through like curtains and things. And whenever the ethics questions come up, Kushner brushes them off. There's a fundamental disconnect here. How can you be a private citizen one day, a shadow envoy the next, and a businessman seeking foreign capital in between? It's a conflict of interest so large, it's practically its own continent. But let's talk about his association with the Saudis now. Say what you want about Candace Owens. She speaks the truth. And especially in regards to Jared Kushner and that whole line. Remember, she is the reason, she and Tucker Carlson are part of why we are in this mess. And again, this is all my opinion. No one has to believe these are just thoughts that run in my head. Potentially her best friend, Charlie Kirk, was murdered by our leaders. By a foreign government, actually, but allowed by our leaders and then covered it up. You don't think that scared the shit out of them? That's partially why they're talking.
Uncomfortable that Jared was so intimately involved, right? He was the person that had Trump's ear, right? There is the king, and then there is the person who whispers into the king's ear. The king's advisor holds a lot of power. But anyways, Jared was that person. Everybody knew that if you wanted to get something done, you went through Jared. Okay, Jared was running the White House the first term. He just was. And what I think bothered me was Jared had so much power and he got a lot done that he wanted through President Trump. But then when Jared left his post at the White House, suddenly we learn that Saudi Arabia injects $2 billion into his fund. Okay, this is a headline in the Wall Street Journal. Jared Kushner's new fund plans to invest Saudi money in Israel. And so regarding the money, they would think after being in the office and speaking to your father-in-law that maybe that money would be coming to America in a big way. Well, Forbes did a deep dive on where that money was going. This was the headline. It was why Jared Kushner will become a billionaire no matter who wins. And in that article, it tells us, quote, Affinity had a slow start, deploying almost no capital in its first year while Kushner learned the ropes and navigated a turbulent pandemic market. But it's since picked up the pace and has now invested about $1.6 billion in at least 8 firms in Brazil, Germany, Israel, the U.S. and UK, and the UAE in industries ranging from finance to energy. Its most notable investments so far are the ones that it made in Israel.
Ooh. I mean, that could not all be a conflict of interest. We have to wonder, is this why? I mean, it's obviously why Trump put Kushner in power to, bring peace to the Middle East, right?
Piece of property, what it could be for so many people.
These people make me sick. And if they don't make you sick, I don't know what's wrong with you. There's literally something wrong with you. But there's Jared Kushner and the president, Donald Trump, salivating over blood-soaked land where Israel carried out a genocide in Gaza, of course.
What we didn't see in that video was when it cut to Jared, and he sat there and talked about how valuable waterfront property and moving people out to clean it up, right? And what is she saying? Again, the master of spin, but what's he really doing?
And so despite never being elected for anything, and despite the fact that he's not an official member of the Trump White House, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, presented the White House's grand plan for rebuilding Gaza from scratch. Now, let's just pause and acknowledge, in order to build Gaza from scratch, that would mean that there's nothing left there to repair, right? It's been leveled. So the area, the region where a genocide definitely didn't happen at the hands of the Israelis has been totally leveled. So they got to rebuild it from scratch. Okay.
She is correct. Nobody talks about that. The Young Turks is one of the best independent news sites, so I highly recommend it. But again, valuable waterfront property. This isn't a policy proposal. That was a developer's pitch. He looks at history, at human suffering, and he sees land that just needs to be cleared for a luxury resort. He doesn't see people. He sees rocks. He sees things that trash to be taken out of. And it's a total lack of respect for human life and history. Now, when prior to Trump starting the war in Iran, he had been negotiating, well, not him, but his people had been negotiating the deal with Iran that would essentially, they would have given up the uranium. They would have basically given us everything we wanted, right? And that was what was going to happen. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, Trump decides to bomb Iran, which is one of the stupidest things he could have ever done. But I wonder who put him up to that.
Conflicts of interest, Steve and I call experience and trusted relationships.
In 1 month, the U.S. dropped more than 5,000 bombs on Iran and billed the American taxpayer over $30 billion to do it. And one name keeps coming up as responsible: Jared Kushner. These connections, despite having no experience in asset management whatsoever. So he went to the Saudi State Public Investment Fund and asked for money. And so the Saudi government Kushner had spent 4 years protecting wired him $2 billion. Kushner took that $2 billion in Saudi money to become the largest shareholder in Phoenix Holdings, Israel's biggest insurance company. Israel and Saudi Arabia used to be historic rivals, and yet Kushner, leveraging those Netanyahu and MBS relationships, said he wanted to open a, quote, investment corridor between Saudi Arabia and Israel. He is the corridor. Saudi money flowing through Kushner.
He is the corridor is exactly right. This kid has positioned himself so well that he is enacting a plan that, again, in my opinion, he has been put into place to fulfill. I mean, this is fucking Netanyahu's wet dream. He completely controls. That's why everyone is like, why is this presidency so different? It is not just because of the blackmail with Bibi Netanyahu. It is very much because of Jared Kushner. They would not be able to pull this off with Jared Kushner. He was the horse you didn't see, right? The one you didn't see coming. Now, when Kushner decided to announce the purchase of the Albanian island, when that broke, he gave an interview, and at one point he said, oh, you know, we were out on the Rothschilds' boat, and, you know, we ended up in this beautiful place, and, you know, that was how the spin started. And then Ivanka, the wife of wife, she was lock in step with her hubby, and I mean lock in step.
On an incredible project with my husband in the Mediterranean. It's massive in scale. An unbelievable, beautiful 1,400 hectare private island in the middle of the Mediterranean. We were on a friend's boat and we stopped for a swim. Effectively, that's how we found it.
Effectively, that's how we find it. We were on a friend's boat. That friend is the Rothschilds. That is who she is referencing. But notice the difference as she's describing it and what's really happening. It was not an abandoned island. It was a nature reserve and a very important environmental structure and part of the Albanians' culture. And these people come in and essentially say they found it, like they're fucking Christopher Columbus or some shit.
We swam to the islands. We went on a hike, barefoot all the way up to the top, and we were just captivated. And it stayed with us ever since. We have 5 miles of beachfront directly across from the island.
Just like Gaza, they see beachfront, they don't see people, they don't see respect, they don't see wildlife. They see money to be made and a place where only they and their people can have fun. They want to kick everybody out and make the world their own. They don't want to share anymore. That's why they don't need people anymore. And they refuse to share.
Turns out that the island hosts 3,600 Soviet-era tunnels and hardened bunkers, which were built to withstand a nuclear attack. Now, couple that with the fact that Donald Trump's White House ballroom is really about building a massive underground bunker. One might ask, what exactly are the rich preparing for? Now, with that in mind, the land purchase was approved a year and a half ago to be exact. It was in 2024. In December of 2024, after months of consternation, Albania gave preliminary approval to a plan proposed by Kushner to build on the uninhabited island of Shazan, once a secretive military.
And see how that's different than it was presented? They scoped it out from Albania. And also, the laws have just changed because the laws were actually more protective of that island, which I was mispronouncing, that should be Shazon. It was protected because of the flamingos, because of the wildlife, because of nature. And again, it's still being presented as this island that they found. And one, our media is running with it. And two, that has no respect for the Albanian people. That place has a history. And what this should tell us is that more than anything, Kushner is there to ensure that the world is taken over by Israel. Again, in my opinion, and I am not suicidal. And then once he buys that island, he puts up a fence around it and tells the local people that this is progress. How is it an island that you found if you literally had to put a fence around it and kick people out? That does not mean you found it. It was a found island. It means you stole it. The European Union is even threatening to pull their support for Albania's integration because of this land grab, right? The people of Albania are not buying their bullshit, and they are protesting hardcore. Jared isn't just a developer anymore. He is an international disruptor, and he's doing it all while his father-in-law is in power. He's fencing off people from their own land. Sound familiar? Just like he did in Gaza. And the IDF wants to join with our military. What do you think is going to happen to America? What new world are we going to live in based on Jared Kushner and his good pal, more Uncle Bibi? That should frighten all of us. But let's talk about a moment where the mask slipped. Both Jared Kushner and his wife allowed the fact that they made this purchase due to the fact that they were with the Rothschilds, right? So essentially what we were made to believe in that moment, if you don't know who the Rothschilds are, is that they were just with these friends. You don't drop a name like that for no reason. That is a name that most everyone in the world knows. There are conspiracy theories about that family. They're one of the wealthiest families in the world. They also are credited for creating Israel. So when he dropped that name, it's because he had permission. And it's because they run him. So really what we were being told is that the Rothschilds were buying that island through Jared Kushner. And that they were how that was made to happen. And that he works for them. Well, for those of you who don't know who the Rothschilds are, let's take a little look.
The Rothschild family. Originating in Frankfurt, the Rothschild family holds substantial sway in banking circles, recognized as a leading financial force and among the world's wealthiest families. But the secretive truth about the Rothschild family is that they were the masterminds behind Israel's creation, having signed the Balfour Declaration in 1917. Lord Rothschild himself confessed in an interview saying, "We created the state of Israel." Adding to the intrigue, Tel Aviv boasts Rothschild Boulevard, one of its most stunning streets. And the name Rothschild, it translates to Red Shield, while their family crest proudly displays the iconic Star of David. The Rothschild.
Now notice what they said, the Balfour Agreement in 1917. And again, the Rothschilds made it very, very apparent that Israel would not have been created by them, which means they created it, which means they run it to a certain extent.
The Abraham Accords are more important than ever. Clearly, this is one of the hardest problem sets that's existed probably in geopolitics, but the end state has to look something like this, and it has to have two elements. Number one, Israel has to have the security to not be threatened by its neighbors and to be able to protect its citizens. That is absolutely crucial, is non-negotiable, and I do think.
And it's funny when they say that, they actually believe it, but they are saying that babies and women and everyone who happens to be of the race of terrorists that they're accusing at that moment in time, that their lives aren't unimportant, right? What does it matter? The atrocities that Israel does, they are the chosen people, right? But it's interesting he tails it back to them, because the story really isn't about the Kushners. Once again, it's about the elite that are behind them. Because Jared Kushner would be nothing without all of the corruption and without Israel. Drop a black heart if you've made it this far. I know this one was a long one. And if you still disbelieve me, let's go back to how the entire world was shocked when we went into Iran. Excuse me, when this country went into Iran, because we did not support this. And remember, everyone was shocked, and almost every politician said the same thing. Israel has asked every single president to do this for years, and no one would do it. No one would do it. Essentially, what they were saying is that no one would be that stupid as to do it. So, why did Trump do it?
For 47 years has been chanting death to America, death to Israel too. But you're the big Satan, we're the small Satan. Death to America. They've murdered and maimed.
Notice how that manipulation, he wants to incense us. He wants to create an enemy. He wants to appease us and make that threat come for us.
Thousands of Americans in Iraq and Afghanistan with their IEDs, these are roadside bombs. They bombed your embassies, tried to assassinate.
And he bombs schools. I believe that they actually blew up the only school in Lebanon for disabled children. They blew up a school with our weapons in Iran. And they do unspeakable acts. And so I've asked myself, how much more do they want? Some people look at the track record, the displacement, the offshore land grabs, the shadow negotiations, and they see a disturbing pattern. It's like he's moved from the playground of politics to a game of global real estate, treating nations like developmental sites. We have to stop and ask, why was he the one chosen to do this? Why are we allowing someone with so many unresolved conflicts to be at the helm of our country's future? Or who is he doing this for? Perhaps his uncle, perhaps he's fulfilling that dream. Again, this is all my opinion. It's an opinion backed by some facts I've just laid out. And it's time we start looking at the man behind the fence, because the more he acquires, the less we actually own. Take care, folks.